enormous amounts of money in getting us off oil. But it's going to take real commitments from people in the White House and from the skills of people like you in this room to make this happen. Flower asked me to talk about my experience leading the Democratic National Committee through a period of great change. When I lost the campaign for presidency, lost in the primaries, I tried to take stock of where we were, and I realized that we were in trouble in this country, and I wanted to look for something that I could do, since I didn't get, people ask me, why in the world did you take the DNC job? And the reason is I didn't get the one I applied for. But I also believe that no Democrat could win the presidency unless we had a political operation that could compete with the Republicans. The Republicans may be completely incompetent in terms of running the country, but they most certainly know how to win elections, and they are very good at it, and we were not. They were in the field every day for 4 years. We were in the field for 1 year out of 4 years, only when we had a presidential candidate. So, following the 2004 election, I ran for chairman of the Democratic National Committee as the candidate from outside Washington. And unfortunately, about 350 of the 450 votes you need to win the chairmanship would come from outside Washington. And we clearly needed to do things differently. The first thing we did was fire all the consultants, because we paid them a lot of money to tell us how to lose every year. And I hired a 34-year-old African-American by the name of Cornell Belcher as our pollster. And the reason I did that is because he had done a poll for the previous Democratic administration, which had not been finished by the time I took office, and he came in to explain it to me one day. And it was about faith voters, people whose religion informed their vote. A group of people we had ceded to the Republican Party. And what Cornell came and essentially told me was that people voted on their values, not just Republicans or so-called family values, but that almost every American, including very well-educated people, voted their values. That it mattered much less what your 25 position papers said on healthcare, or on Silicon Valley, or on trade, than it did what kind of a person you thought was running for President of the United States that you would like to support. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. No one, even the very, very smart people in this room who are involved in this very, very smart industry, no one can know what's going to happen in the next 8 years. We can guess, but no one can know what's going to happen in the world in the next 8 years. So doesn't it make sense, instead of just voting on what people say about a particular issue at a given time, which they may have to change, doesn't it make sense for the American people to vote on what kind of values the person has? Because you want to know how that person's going to respond to some unforeseen event in a way that would make you most comfortable. Cornell Belcher knew the question to what's the matter with Kansas. I mean, how many of you have seen that book? It's a book about why people who are struggling vote Republican, and it has to do with values. So we began to look at how the Democratic Party could speak to people's values. And the first thing we discovered is we did not exist in half the states. That we weren't present in half the states in America. So therefore, we didn't bother to talk to half the people in the country. Well, for us to pretend to be a national party without being in half the states in the country makes no sense whatsoever. So we put staff in every state in the country. I'll never forget my very first visit to another state as Democratic National Committee chair was to Mississippi, a state that we had not contested for about 30 years. People thought in Washington I was crazy to begin with. And then when I announced my first visit as chair was going to be to Mississippi, they thought that I was really crazy. So they are all looking and waiting to laugh, so I went to Mississippi. The Mississippi party had hired a ballroom at the Holiday Inn, which seated 800 people. 900 people showed up. Every elected official showed up, Democratic elected official, including all 4 former Democratic governors. They had to open up the doors and put tables in the hallway, and they ran out of food and they brought in pizza for the place next door. In Mississippi, the Democrats wanted to win badly. They just didn't have the tools to do it. The one thing you can't teach, and I really don't have to tell this group of people that, the one thing you cannot teach is the will to win. is the drive for success. That you can't teach. But if someone has the drive for success, you can teach them how to succeed. That's what we did. The Mississippi Democratic Party consisted of a part-time secretary and an executive director who made $27,000 a year. That was the Democratic Party in Mississippi. We put 5 staffers in Mississippi, hired locally, reporting to the chief of staff. We put in a new voter file for the whole country, including in Mississippi, and taught everybody how to use it. And I'm proud to say that 3 years later, the Democrats won back the Mississippi State Senate, and we elected a congressman from a district in Mississippi that we hadn't held for many, many years. In Mississippi, the second largest district in the world. And that was the beginning of the 50-state strategy. We said that we would compete everywhere, even in states that we knew we couldn't win in. Because ultimately, if you want to win 5 years from now or 10 years from now, you make your investments now. Because if you suddenly think you're going to win 10 years from now and you start then, you're almost certainly not going to win. So that everything we did at the Democratic Party was going to have a long-term effect. I get in big fights with some of the Washington establishment. They wanted money right now for elections right now. And we said, you're not getting any money for anything that doesn't benefit lots of people down the road, not just what you're doing today. And so the fight was on. It was actually great to have the fight. I know you all think the fight was horrible, but the truth is, everybody in America knew what the 50-state strategy was as a result of that fight. You know, the newspapers and the media don't report substance, but they love to report controversy. So they wanted to write about this fight. Every couple of weeks there would be somebody to say something, and there'd be a big article on the front page of most papers in the country about this big fight we were having. But in order to explain the fight, they had to print 2 paragraphs to explain what the 50-state strategy is so they know what we were fighting about. So everybody who cared about politics in the states read every 2 weeks 2 paragraphs of what the 50-state strategy was. The best publicity we ever had. And of course, since 99.9% of the population lives outside of Washington, D.C., I was in pretty good shape. So we began to invest. Not huge amounts. This is about an $8 million program a year for the whole state, country. We had 3 or 4 staff members in every state, and then we began to build our infrastructure. We now have, in every state of the country, a voter file which gives us all the information about what you need. That's the same everywhere. Everybody can use it the same way. So if a candidate runs, for example, there were 2 Asian American women who were running for the city council against each other in St. Paul, Minnesota last summer. And they were running against each other in a primary. They both worked really, really hard to be the first woman, Asian American woman, ever to serve on the city council in St. Paul, Minnesota. And they knocked on hundreds of thousands of